we've been asked to write a position paper for UNESCO on the future of AI and learning. So this is a kind of a quick summary of the position paper that we actually put into UNESCO last week. But also what I'm going to do is going to do a demo of a space that we've been building, which is resolving what we see to be some of the really big problems with AI. So, hey, it's a problem for education, right? And we might crudely call that problem cheating, which is, the AI will think for you. It'll write for you. It'll do things for you. That's an immediate problem, which wasn't here until this, by the way, this generation of AI. I've got to say AI has been around a long time. The big moment, by the way, is 200 lines of code in the work that the Vasani et al. People did in the 2017 article, which was the transformer architecture. That's a kind of a paradigm shift in AI, and it really upsets the apple cart in terms of in education in a lot of places, a lot of ways. So let me say this. Mike Sharple's defined this this reality now as democratizing cheating. So in other words, you could always pay somebody $100 in a paper mill somewhere in China or India, more likely, or wherever, to write your paper for you. And his estimate was, or some people have estimated, that up to 15% of higher ed assignments were written in paper mills. But what we've got now with these AIs is not just the fact that they're not reliably detectable. Anybody who says they can detect AI reliably in a piece of student work is kind of fooling you. But also then there are these AI, but I'm interested in it. I get these ads in Facebook all the time. So these are things where if there is some sign of AI, it will obscure it for you. Maybe it puts in a few typos or something. I don't know how they work, but the only thing is there's a lot of promotion about how to get your work done. Now, we've got a solution, and we can end the whole talk with the next slide if you want to. That's the solution. Now, what's the problem with this? The problem with this is not that you might laugh, but the problem is not that it's funny. The problem is that it's not funny in the sense that it involves a conception of learning, which is learning is long-term memory. So those students have gone in there, they don't have their books, they don't have the internet connection, they can't talk to each other. And that's all we're going to assess. We're only going to assess what you can remember. We're not going to assess what you can do with knowledge. We can not assess how you collaborate with others around knowledge. We're just going to see what you can remember. So in a way, it's the people who are good at tests and good at remembering who do well at tests and do well at school. Well, that's the wrong thing to be measuring learning by. Now, in a way, the idea of cheating and the reality of cheating, though, trivializes the problem. And the problem is what we would call cognitive offloading. Now, I don't know, if you're like me, I have the AI open all day and I keep asking questions, and it's incredibly helpful. And not only that, I have 2 or 3 different AIs to get different answers, different LLMs there open. So the question then is, when does that substitute for your thinking, and when does it push your thinking, right? That's a really, and for me, it pushes my thinking all the time. Occasionally, it kind of substitutes for it because it means I don't have to go looking something up and think it through. Oh, yeah, that's the answer. So that's a kind of a difficult question, actually, which is challenges education in a fundamental way, and a way that it hasn't been challenged until now. But beyond that, one of the solutions now is, these proctored tests, which are often select response tests. And what I want to do is before I show our tool, I want to make a very, very strong critique of, of select response tests. So because assignments now, you can't know whether there's cheating, you put the students in front of a ABCD test, the old bubble tests, so to speak, and we'll assess things that way. Well, what I want to say is that's a terrible damn idea. And these tests, actually, I'm going to be blunt, should not exist at all for the reasons that I've outlined here. But if we go back to them increasingly, because AI, we don't know how the student's using it, but we can at least get them to do a test. We go back to all these problems, and these are, I'm using select item response theory here against itself to explain one of some of the fundamental problems with that. But also, we are now in a complex knowledge environment where all those tests can detect is what I would call surface learning. Stuff you've remembered, correct application of procedures where you get the right answer. Well, this is not what we need in this particular environment, the environment we're in today. And the interesting thing is AI can push you to do what we would call deep learning. Now, of course, the major canonical alternative to select response tests is supply response assessments. And that was typically essays, projects, work problems, where you're doing a math problem and you're explaining what you're doing as you go. And we can see all the lines of your thinking line by line, research reports, experiment write-ups. So these are typical artifacts used in education, in higher education, to measure what we would call complex epistemic performance. So this stuff back here only measures surface learning, correct answers, memory, all that kind of stuff. Whereas these artifacts do that. However, we know there are big problems with them, and the reason that these problems are the reason why so often we go back to select response assessments. Look, it's just a small sample. You're writing. It's only one thing you do in the course. Practicality. And again, this is using the criteria around the item response theory concepts. They're labor intensive, and marking. What's the worst part of any teacher or instructor or professor's life? It's marking essays. The feedback is too late and too little to contribute to learning. So, at the end of the year, you get B+ for your essay. Well, what the hell? What am I going to do with that? Other than it tells me I'm a slightly inadequate person. And then iterator reliability. There are real problems about the validity of the 68 for your essay, because someone else might have given it 62, and that's the difference between an A and a B or something, you know what I mean? So in other words, the only way, it's very expensive to deal with these kinds of artifacts rigorously around iterator reliability, and it involves complex and expensive moderation systems. So, okay, so although this might be a nice form of assessment to be using, it's also problematic, and it's the reason why we fall back to select response assessments. Now, the answer is, with AI, you can do this stuff really well. And I'm going to show you how with the demo. So you can have people building these knowledge representations, if you like, complex knowledge representations, which are evidence of complex epistemic performance. So one layer is you're building an artifact, but that artifact provides evidence of deeper thinking. Now, the AI, with the AI, you can do that and get around these practical problems with supply response assessments. Now, but again, one of the problems there is cognitive offloading. You give somebody the space, they're off to the AI gives them the answer, they copy and paste it in. How can you know what's going on there? However, on the other side of the coin, why would we proscribe AI? Why would we say you can't use AI? Well, we're never going to know, because how can we know how you've used AI? But in a sense, we've always had this idea of the social mind. Remember that slide of the people in the exam with the blinkers on? That's the individual mind. But the social mind is, I go to the library, I look things up, I look up the internet, I take a link, I talk to the person beside me as opposed to having the blinkers on. So in fact, the real nature of knowledge is one which is the exercise of the social mind. It's not an individual mind. Okay, so that's a quick kind of theoretical introduction to what we've been trying to build with CyberScholar, and this is it here. Let me give you a quick background to this. I'm a professor at the University of Illinois. I've worked in digitally mediated learning for a long time now, and I've got to say what's happened since that 200 lines of code in 2017 or whenever it was first enacted, the transformer stuff, is a paradigm shift, which honestly, even though I've worked in this area, I didn't see coming. We've done AI, conventional data-based AI before this, statistical AI, but this I didn't see coming. So what we did is, when it came, pretty quickly we pivoted to building. We have a platform called Scholar. We quickly pivoted to building generative AI into the platform. So we've had AI in our platform since the beginning of 2013. But now this new version of the platform we started building, it's now 6 or 8 months old, and I'm going to show you a version which was released at the end of yesterday. So we're moving relatively fast to do some stuff. So I think the best way to show you what the possibilities are is to just show it to you live like this. So this is the Scholar interface. In fact, we have a new interface over here. So I'm sorry I'm logging in and you have to put up with me sort of jumping around with things. So so this is the new CyberScholar, which is an all new setup. And I log in, and it's my conventional Scholar login, which I will do. And bang, here I am. And what I'm going to do is go straight to a work. So the key artifact in here is the thing called a work. So I've jumped in, and this happens to be one of my students' work in my Learning Design Leadership program. So we've used this now. We've trialed this in all sorts of places. We've trialed it in K-12 schools, middle schools and high schools, students doing writing. We've been using it in a number of settings. We're using it for medical students writing patient notes as part of a medical record. We're using it for writing police reports. So we're using it in a number of sites. But this particular site that I'm going to show you is my master's and doctoral students doing technology in education. So this is just, I'm showing you one particular work to show you how it works. So this particular student wrote this work about using station rotation and generative AI in tailored learning in the middle school. And I'll just walk you through it. So it's got kind of videos happening all the way through it. It's a conventional, I can kind of run the videos. Oh, okay. We changed the media thing last night, so the videos are not visible. So that's probably a bug since last night. But it's a full piece of work where this particular student is station rotation, by the way, is there are stations around the classroom and the kids move from station to station doing different things. And she set up generative AI at each of the stations, and the students can talk to each other and the AI at each station. So that's the project. Okay, so what I can do, if I was to be writing this work, what happens is this is the editor, right? So this is a regular editor where I can do all sorts of formatting things. But one of the interesting things I can do while I'm writing it is I can use a thing called Cyber Helper. So let me explain to you, there are two big phases I'm going to take you through. The helper phase while you're writing. So this is AI helping you write. And then the second phase is once I've finished a draft, I will get a global review on the ideas, right? So the helper is just more granular stuff, help me do my work. Review is, okay, tell me what you think about the work overall. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to now get some AI help from Cyber Helper. So see this first, I'll go back and highlight something. So I'm a middle school teacher, time of the academic year, blah, 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 blah. Oh, look, I'm just going to actually highlight utilizing station rotation. And I want to get the AI helper over here, which I am now opening. I want to get it to brainstorm station rotation for me. So what it's over here, I pull this across now to get that out of the way. What I'm going to do is kind of show you a configuration question issue first. So in this case, the instructor will have already configured this, but the student can configure themselves. So firstly, this is not connected to any particular AI. So we can do Llama, we can do DeepSeek, we can do Grok, we can do Quen, which is Alibaba, we can do Anthropic, we can do Google, various Mistral, which is the French one. So this is actually all and the latest of the AIs. So we're not particularly linked to any AI. And the interesting thing is you go to different AIs and you get different kinds of outcomes, different types of voice. That's kind of interesting. But the teachers set this one to be OpenAI GPT 4.0 latest. The next thing, which is pretty important, is we have a knowledge base. So this is, again, I'll sort of lapse into technicality every now and then. This is retrieval augmented generation. And what we've done here is we've built a knowledge base of all our students writing. So our students in our course do innovative technology in education work, right? Of which this is one example. So, and we write about it extensively. So the work that we have comes to 35 million tokens. So all our students work for the last 5 years. Everything we've written, 35 million tokens, which might be 32 million words or so. So we've got that in this class knowledge base. So what's going to happen is when we get the brainstorming we do now, we've got a dedicated knowledge base which knows more about the specifics of obscure things like station rotation using generative AI than the underlying foundation model can ever know. And by the way, the thing for a teacher setting this up is, okay, you're doing cell biology, put in 10 cell biology textbooks, put in 200 articles. You can actually build a knowledge base on any specific domain, and then it's the domain that's being curated by the teacher that speaks to the learner. But the next thing is we have this thing called rubric agents, right? We've this is a hybrid of the conventional academic idea of a rubric. So I'm going to choose a rubric agent, and we've got here, look, police writing skills, medical rubrics, but this is the one we use for our students here, which is ways of knowing frontier research. So we've built a set of evaluation criteria for a good knowledge in this area. I won't go through it in detail until I'll show you the review, but it's there and it's helping us do it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run this without user input. So what the AI input here is just I'll close this up so we can see that. The AI input here is just the boilerplate thing is I want you to brainstorm this for me, but I could add a bit more to that and fine tune the brainstorming a little bit, but I'm just going to run it like this, run it without user input. So, okay, so here we go. Please help me brainstorm. That's me speaking to it now. By the way, one of the things is we have profiles in here as well. So the system knows the learner on the basis of their profile and will know the learner on the basis of everything they've previously written. So anyhow, it's running that now. And I don't know how long it'll take. Now, let me just say why it'll probably take 15, 20 seconds. The reason why this is heavy duty processing is it's going past our 35 million token knowledge base. It's going out to the foundation LLM, which is the OpenAI. Here we go. It's done it already. So it's dealing with the rubric agents as well, which I'll come to in a second. Absolutely, Dr. Cope. It's patronizing me by calling me Dr. Cope. They should have absolutely Bill, but not to worry. Based on your extensive draft and extensive so what it then does, here is some brainstorming about how you might deal with this question. So this is kind of telling you what you might do, but our view is that we're going to know when you copy this. So one of the things I want to say about this is we are also tracking contextual AI. So we're tracking keystrokes, we're tracking click streams, we're tracking timestamps. We don't know how much time you spend on this. And if you get great ideas out of this, fantastic. That's what AI is for. And if you produce a really powerful piece of work, but if you just copy this, we're going to know, right? So we want to push your thinking. So the key behind this, by the way, is this peculiar mix of contextual and generative AI. We're giving you all the AI you might want. It's really helpful. It really pushes your thinking. But if you try to copy this, we're going to know. And we're going to see what the differences are as we're comparing what the AI says with what you say. So this is the Cyber Helper routine. And the other things we have in here are research, plan, expand. You got something short, but look, tell me how to elaborate on this. Summarize, I read too much, pull it down. Translate, check the flow, which is what's the argument, the logic. Give me some suggestions. Proofread, of course. Why would you ever penalize a learner because they've got something which is not well formed in English? One of the things these AIs do brilliantly well is form things well. But by the way, we never rewrite. We only tell you might rephrase this in the following way, or just ask a question of the AI. The important thing is, though, that this is always heavily mediated against the knowledge base and the rubric agents. Okay, so let's say now I've finished this darn thing, and that's the help phase that's over. I am now going to, and by the way, when I do multiple things, it keeps breadcrumbs of all the things I do. So what happens is if I want to go, oh, what was I doing when I was going back and brainstorming? These are breadcrumbs of all the things you've done, which are color-coded back to those different types of action. So, what we know is by the time you've finished the draft of your work, we're not going to only know how much you've used the AI, we're going to know exactly the ways you use the AI. So proofreading, that's fine, that's nothing. But if you copied the basic structure of the plan, we're going to know that, we're going to see that, okay? And it's the contextual AI that will tell us. Okay, so I'm now in the stage of doing a review. I finished my work and I'm ready for it to be reviewed. So new review. So new review, we always increment to a new review because we want to know the ways in which the feedback influenced your work. Differences tell us how the different versions differ. So this increments to a new version, and I'm not going to, we can do peer reviews in here as well, but we're going to do an AI review. So this is what we've chosen. This is our rubric, which I'm going to show you in a second. This is our model, which is OpenAI 4.0 latest. This is knowledge base. Search breadth is the breadth we're going to, the extent, semantics breadth of what we're going to take out of the knowledge base. Start generating the review, and it creates a new version and starts a review. So that previous version becomes a read-only version. And one of the really important things is we want to track in a granular way the development of your work over multiple versions with lots of feedback. So this again is in computational terms. I mean, we are just surprised by this, to be quite frank. You know, we're surprised by the fact that it does so much so quickly. It's a 5,000 word text. Each of these rubric agents is going past the work once each time. So it's actually 10 prompts here in terms of prompt engineering. And I'll show you in a second that they're quite extensive, but it's going back to the 35 million token knowledge base. And it's going, as I say, it's 10 passes through the whole thing. So actually, OpenAI is being a little bit slow today. So
quick question, Bill.
Yes.
Someone is asking if we can share the link to CyberScholar. Is that all right? And do people have access?
The answer is almost, not yet. I mean, this version is literally from last night. So we're moving quite fast. We want to make it accessible. But if somebody would like to use it, email me directly, right? And I can probably arrange something. Because one thing we are interested in is people using it in different sites from a research point of view. And we're really, really interested, to be quite frank, if they're prepared to document the experience in terms of our research agenda. It's not quite ready for public consumption yet. As I say, we've been gradually building this over the last 2.5 years. We've been using this with our students successfully for the last semester. Since what are we now? This is summer. So for the spring semester, we first introduced it. So yes, email me and I can. It's not publicly, it's not available on the web. Yes, you can get to it with a login, and it's just a slightly convoluted way to get there, but it's a web-based app. So yeah, send me a message. Now we're nearly going through these 10 things because we need to get to the end for me to be able to show it to you. Again, one of the things about this AI, and this is one of my last slides, is the unfiltered use of publicly accessible GPTs is educationally a disaster. And I'm going to explain why I think it's educationally a disaster, but at the end. But what we've done is these layers of overlay. Choose any one you like, build out your rubric agents, develop a knowledge base, all the things you can see here. Okay, so it's given us a star rating based on the number of levels in the rubric agents, but I want to show you an example of a rubric agent. So this is here. How effectively does this writer connect with their previous experience? And we've written quite a long description there of that. So the AI works very well if you're extremely explicit about what you want the student to be doing. I'm going to go down to another one and show you another one of those before we look into some of the responses. This one is evidence, empirical evidence, verifiable and reliable sources, relevance. So we've spelt these out in a lot of detail, and what we're going to do is build a library of these things. Anybody can build these things themselves, but the difference between this and a legacy rubrics were just a sheet of paper with a grid with, on one axis was a criteria, another axis was levels, and the words you put in there were had a lot of professional stuff, assumptions down the back, abstract assumptions down the back, and they're not good for AI, and they're not good for humans either, by the way. We can get the students to use these same criteria to evaluate each other in the same space. Okay, so firstly, Dr. Cope, thank you for sharing this, blah, 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 blah. It's still patronizing. You're not calling me Bill, not to worry. Thank you for the opportunity to evaluate the rich and thoughtful. Thank you. It's really patronizing me. Strengths, areas for improvement. This is really important. Verifiability and specificity. While the sources are generally trustworthy, and what's interesting, it's bringing out real sources from our knowledge base. So in other words, these things can reduce hallucination will never go away. You can radically reduce hallucination, though. So it's actually suggesting specific references, distinguishing anecdotal and from empirical evidence. You know, she's saying what she did, but that's just anecdotal. So this is a really a great set of comments with a rating as well, and an explanation at the end. Now, let me say, oh my goodness, I'm going to get sorry, I'm going to get one from a yellow sticky here because you don't want to deal with my typing. I'm going to say at the bottom here, first I'm going to say, please explain what's something in here that I don't quite understand. Practitioner-based examples. Please explain qualitative descriptions based on da 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 da. So I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to put that into the comments. Excuse me being copying and pasting, but I'm going to put that in there because that's a kind of a difficult idea which I don't quite get. Please explain that. So that's actually quite a high level thing. It's asked me to do this, but what do you mean by that? So what I'm doing is I'm talking here to the AI, but look, one of the things we say, certainly, this is what we should be doing, why it matters, practitioner-based example, in summary. Now, what I'm saying here is, look, actually, this is not AI. By the way, I'm going to say a crazy thing. AI is a terrible damn idea because this is actually a whole pile of human knowledge which has been repackaged. And the closest human knowledge to me is the knowledge base that the instructors built and the rubric agents the instructors built. So the AI is working really off, really in a way, cloning or replicating the intelligence the teacher has put into the system or the educator's put into the system if it's been designed by an instructional designer. So there you go. But look, let me just say this. Look, you know, oh, look, God, I'm not an English speaker. I'm having real trouble with this. Please explain this in my own language. And I like putting this one in because ARIA is, who knows of ARIA? Maybe you do. You do. Oh, great. You do. I know about it because I was doing some work on a dish estate earlier in the year, and it's it's not a big world language. And what it'll do, and it's not a Roman font. And look at this. There it is. There it is in ARIA. And the lovely thing about that, by the way, is that it's not translating it. It's actually rethinking the answer to a difficult question in ARIA. But let me say this. Look, the thing is, you often get feedback which is so damn rich. Look at this here, concepts. Look at that. So much bloody stuff there about the concepts. What are you going to do? Oh, look, honestly, that's going to wear me down. Please explain that in 30 words. And what it'll do, it'll tell you in 30 words what it was thinking. The text effectively, da, 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 da. That's what to do. So this is at the review phase. And what's interesting here is the helper phase just helps you write. The review phase takes your ideas in total, all the ideas that you're trying to express in this piece of work, and it gives you feedback on those. So that's a quick demo of what we've been building. And what I will do now is I will head back to the my slides to create some conclusions. And with a bit of luck, we'll have plenty of time for discussion. I'll leave that window open in case anybody would like me to go back to it. There's some question we want to ask. So let me go. Here's my CITL presentation. Okay, so we've done this. That's where we were. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, right, some conclusions. What I've done here is on the right, I've put LLMs in the wild. And again, this is from our UNESCO paper, which I will probably publish to LinkedIn today or tomorrow, or maybe next day or two. It needs a bit of refinement. So what we've tried to do with CyberScholar is on the left. And when we say in the wild, it means in the wild means I just go to the chat GPT interface and I start working. I'm the student and I just go there and I got this one line, this blank line where I can do any damn thing. So it's just Q&A basically. I got a question, answer for me, right? Well, that's exactly the wrong thing we want AI to be doing. So what we've done in CyberScholar, we've created this workspace with full AI support, which is much more kind of carefully designed, and also will not give you answers. If you say, give me the answer for this, it says no. Here are some ways to get the answer for yourself. So what we've done is we've built into this a series of meta prompts which ban answers, which only kind of provide suggestions and the like. So, and part of the key to this, by the way, is the meta prompts. So, in the AI helper, we've built elaborate meta prompts which then enact those various commands. And similarly with the rubric agents, there's something which, so it's heavily mediated. Secondly, what we aim to do is push thinking, but it won't do the work for you. Whereas in the wild, they'll just do the work for you. We don't know we have no reliable way of knowing the provenance of student work in regular, in the public interfaces. So contextual AI and our system tracks the mix and the kinds of generative AI you've used. The teacher has no control over the prompt. Who knows what the student's going to put in the thing there. Whereas here, the rubric agents are in fact, that's effectively prompt engineering. And the teacher is in control of that. The LLM contains general knowledge, often not reliably, as we know, whereas the knowledge base is a way to give, for the instructor to define what the domain is they're working in. And it might be just all the readings, or it might be more reading than any student can reasonably read, but it's all relevant. So that's that. So this slide here is that the LLMs, it's completely unmoderated. What we've done in this environment also is you can do peer reviews against the same criteria, which actually is a way of moderating the AI. What's the difference between, and then we ask the students, what's the difference between what the AI says here and what a peer says here? So that's that. Learner differences, it's not necessarily aligned with learning objectives and who the learner is. Whereas here we can get to know the learner over time because we get to know what they did, and they built a profile which tells us who they are. But over time we can do something which is calibrated very, very finely to the learner's particular interest, needs, and where they stand in terms of this thing that we call the zone of proximal knowledge. They only talk to them within this zone because that's all they know. Push that zone if you can. Don't go outside the zone. That's a kind of a version of Vygotsky, if people know them, the ed psych kind of theory behind this. Assessment is rubric aligned, whereas here there's no effective assessment. It just says, "Oh, good job." That's the kind of assessment you get out of a LLM in the wild. And what we do is, we know that the good LLMs you've got to pay some money for, to get the more powerful versions. We can choose any foundation model you wish. And in fact, the truth is when you choose one that's paid, we're paying per token for that. We, as in the software, will pay for that per token. But anyhow, we don't want to be tethered to any particular foundation model. You can direct the students to the free ones if you like as well. There's, a lot of them are free. Okay. And what we end up with in terms of privacy is, if you go to ChatGPT, you're giving your life over to them. Now, we're used to giving our life over to IT companies. Every time you do a Google search, you give away your life. Every time you write a message in Gmail, you give away your life. So we're used to that. If you're a little bit worried about that in an educational context, we should be. This can be, because all the data is kept out of the hands. The only things that go to the foundation models are these kind of abstract chunks. There's no identification of who's sending them or the identity of the sender. We can kind of guarantee a degree of privacy within the system that wouldn't otherwise be there. And one last slide, and that is, why are we doing this? And this is again from our UNESCO paper. We think there are three great potentials of generative AI in education. So look, there are lots of dangers. There are lots of things to dislike about the world we live in. There are lots of things to dislike about the people who own these darn things, and the way in which they run their businesses and who they are and whatever. We know that goes without saying. We live in a world which is pretty problematic and pretty unpleasant at times, and they're part of the unpleasantness. But look, these are three things we think we can do positively. One is move away from superficial learning to what we call deep learning, this idea of building knowledge representations which represent complex epistemic performance. That's a pile of syllables, but that's what we mean by deep learning. The second thing is AI can magnify the effectiveness of teachers. You know, this is the teacher actually talking to every student all at once on their own terms when they've supplied a whole lot of material. You know, the conventional essay marking model is you hand the darn thing in and weeks later you get it back with a few comments and it's a B plus and the teacher hated doing the marking. Well, you know, this can make teachers much more effective and their job has changed because they now build knowledge bases and they create these rubric agents, right? Or take them off the shelf. You know, someone else has created the knowledge base who's an instructional designer, someone else has created the rubric agent. Anyhow, it makes teachers more effective. But the big thing for us is, you know, what we call epistemic justice for all. You know, I'm tempted to mention this, but I should. You know, I could spend a whole pile of money, and I'm going to be bad now. People are not going to like this. I could spend an awful lot of money and go to Harvard because Harvard's in the news, you see, and we won't mention why. I could spend a whole lot of money and go to Harvard, but why would I? When you can have this for anybody, anyhow, prompting you to create really powerful knowledge, right? So, you know, one of the things is for us, and you know, we work a lot in K-12 schools. Some schools are poorly resourced, some are really well resourced. You know, the teachers get paid a pile of money at one school and not so much in another. This means there's no reason why the quality of what students do should be different from one side of education to another. And for us, that's a radical possibility. So, you know, this is what we want to, this is, you know, this is why we get up in the morning and do this stuff, basically. Okay, so that's a quick tour through what we've done.
I've got a question. Your 10 rubrics that you showed in the
Right.
instance example, one of those seemed to stand out to me.
Right.
Especially given the framing of your discussion, you're thinking so much. Copying, cognitive offloading, copying and pasting. And the one that stands out is innovation.
Right.
So, and by that, I'm guessing that that's the one that sort of says, well, based on the corpus and the knowledge and all this and, you know, references and validity and all that. But the innovation is the one where, you know, Mary took the Smith article and took James and she combined the debate in a unique way with new data that nobody's really done. And it takes an expert to sort of see that.
Right.
Somebody rose above copy and paste and regurgitation and what everybody, you know, in grad school is saying.
Right.
So how do you do that with that rubric? And is that an important one?
It's really important. So look, here's innovation. This was what we did: creative thinking, innovative potentials, and this was on here. This is what this student actually did. It's a very good analysis, hybridization of models. She put together this kind of historical practice with a modern practice, vision reframing, critical reflexivity, application. And so it actually explains what you did was innovative there. Suggestions to push your creative thinking, including explore more radical or far-fetched possibilities. For example, the role of student agency, extend your thinking. So it's pedagogically imaginative, but always we say, what more could you do? So, you know, I think, you know, one of the things, we recently wrote a paper about this, by the way. One of the things this AI does really, really well is this kind of high-level analysis. So you know, Bloom's taxonomy, which is this damn pyramid. It never was meant to be a pyramid, by the way, but that's ended up one in all the visualizations. Down the bottom is understanding, and up the top is creativity, right? Well, in fact, this is not very good. It's not so good at facts and not so very good at the low-level Bloom stuff, remembering stuff, because it hallucinates, right? It's pretty good here it's pretty good at that if we kind of calibrate it in the ways I've shown you. But what it's really good at is these high-level generalizations. But it's only good at them if you tell it what you want it to be good at, which is this definition up here. This is what we mean. This is by this. Now, one thing I was going to say as well is any teacher can create one of these. This is where you make a rubric agent. So this is some shared ones up here. But this is one here where it's as simple as, this is just a series of forms. So what we've tried to do is, which has rating levels, various, you know, our kind of boilerplate is 4, but you can add as many as you want, and you can describe those things, and then you add a series of criteria. So this kind of is not that hard to make. It's hard at the level of, to do it well, you've got to be very, very, very explicit. So what we've done is two things here. Is we've gone out here and we have provided the tools for people to create a rubric, but then what we've done is built this library of rubrics which people can use, and we intend to extend this library. So it's both do it yourself or use something that an instructional designer thought through.
Well, I love that, but I guess my follow-on would be with AI, which is a system of pattern recognition and statistical probability. Innovation seems to be the thing that there's a new pattern that didn't previously exist. And you or me or anybody in this room who has a subject matter domain can see something that feels kind of fresh or new. But how does AI recognize, I mean, if it's seen a pattern that didn't exist, I mean, how's it technically identifying innovation?
Again, I'm going to say something that might upset some people, which is this new AI, since the 200 lines of code, is not actually statistical. It's semantic, right? And that's another whole technical argument. So when you do this work now, it doesn't do any statistical work. What it does, the stats are already done around the pre-training, GPT, the pre-training, and the stats build the vectors. And what the vectors, when they say there's X trillion parameters, it means they've turned the 100,000 possible words that you might use in English into 5 trillion words by building semantic differentiations between different uses of those words, right? And so what you're doing is you're actually talking to nothing statistical. You're talking to the corpus of human collective intelligence, which has been vectorized. So you're talking to people via this machine because it's fundamentally a semantic machine. It's not a statistical machine. So this means that it's a radical paradigm shift behind data-driven AI. So, in the history of AI, there have been kind of 3 modes, a kind of a logical symbolic mode, collapsed eventually, the winter of AI, followed by data-driven AI, which is supervised and unsupervised machine learning. This is another beast. Anybody who thinks there's much continuity, there's very little continuity between this AI and previous ones. So people think, oh, it's just a machine. Well, of course, it's just a machine. But nevertheless, it's a semantic machine. And that's why it does high-level thinking really, really well, but only when tuned to domains and only when tuned around its criteria of thinking, which we call rubric agents.
Along the lines of the semantic model, I was thinking AI is, the interaction with AI can sometimes perhaps replace social learning. I was wondering if we recognize differences between, I guess, semantic vectorization of human knowledge versus multiple social instances of people interaction and giving examples from their childhood that relate to this concept.
Right.
Is there important things missing or different?
Okay, so that's a really good point. And one of the things we do is, to give you an example of that review process, we always have humans looking at each other's work and giving each other's comments. But more than that, the moderation bit is those humans reflecting on their responses compared to the AI responses. Oh, the AI didn't say this, but I would say that. We've done a lot of research on the differences between the human peer responses and the AI responses. The differences are really substantial, and people want to hear both. They want to hear what humans say, and they want to hear what the machine says. What the machine says is too clever and too good and too anodyne and too consistent, by the way. Whereas what humans say is eccentric, inconsistent, in really human ways. So you've got to do both. So that's our argument about no AI without human moderation, right? So, and it's not even a human in the loop. It's a human in charge, if you like, or a human who is required reflexively to be always thinking critically about the AI in comparison to humans. So humans are better at some things, and and they're different. It's different. It's profoundly different. So that's one of our rules. So we've built in here the peer review function as well. So everything gets AI reviewed or also gets reviewed by peers.
I really like the side piece. So when that came along, Jim showed me like this artifact thing and Claude. instead of like having a produced product at the end, it's like this side thing that you're working on along with the
Right.
AI. I think that collaboration really
Yep, it's
puts
nice.
that effort there, and your design kind of guides that
Right,
effort
right.
there.
Actually, we had that before any of the AIs did, but because it was an obvious thing to do in a way. But what we've done, which is kind of slightly different, is we're very interested in tracking the relationship between the two sides in order to understand what you're thinking and what the process of your thinking and the nature of your learning. So that's why we need to kind of, with the contextual AI, need to track that in a granular way.
I mean, the demo you showed was where the person or the user is starting with a created artifact and then editing. So what's your experience with people starting fresh, right? What's the balance between, do they start writing themselves or do they start with the AI?
Right.
Or are there guidelines or does the platform push people in a particular direction?
It pushes people in the direction of writing still. So we will not give you feedback until you've got something there to highlight. Right now, I just did that. But what I could do is I preferably, look, I've written the first 3 paragraphs. Now give me feedback. So what we do is we won't give you any feedback until you've started. Now, the minimalist thing is I've just typed in 3 words, but what we really mean is look, the theoretical concepts. No, I really want help with the theoretical concepts. I've written this, so you can't actually get some feedback until you've written something. So that's kind of our idea about that. And if you start off without writing anything and just simply give me the theoretical concepts, we're going to know that, right? And by the way, what we don't, we're going to know and see that that's what you've done. So there's a kind of a, it might be okay because I don't know where to start. I've got no thoughts. What am I going to do? It might be okay to do that. And if we don't take control of you doing that, you're going to do it anyhow, somewhere. So yeah.
And if a user just pastes something from another interface, you capture that.
Right. So what we assume is that everything you've copied and pasted is not yours. So, one of the issues is if you've written it in Google Docs and you paste it in, well, we can't know the nature of that. Grammarly now do a thing which I think is problematic, actually. Grammarly have a not very good product called authorship. And what they do is they take control of your clipboard. So they know where you've got some stuff from by taking control of your clipboard. Now, I don't know whether we want to take control of people's clipboards, but that's how they do it. And it's a pretty crude way to do it, to be quite frank, because, and also there's all sorts of ways of having incognito other spaces where you can easily rort the Grammarly thing. So, so one of the preconditions here is this has to be your workspace. We call this a work editor. This is not where you just put stuff. This is where you do your work because and you're going to want us to know how you did your work because that's how we're going to assess you.
I had 2 questions online. One was, could you say something about how the program documents the student's work, i.e. what does its records of the student's work look like?
I didn't catch the other half of that. So say it to me again.
The second half was, what does its record of the student's work look like?
Okay, all right then. So I got a couple of answers, and this is all work in progress. A couple of things is what we can do is we can print this out. Sorry, some of this has moved. So what we can do is when we print it out, it shows the record of everything that's done, and it's just like we just print out a PDF. Maybe it's here. Sorry, this is all moved since yesterday. So anyhow, you can print it out as a PDF where you can see all they've done and all the work. The other thing which I didn't show you that we're moving over into this space. So it's not here yet, but see back here we have this analytics overview. What we're going to be doing there is building a kind of an assessment framework there, and we've got it in our old system. We just haven't moved it into the new system yet. So yeah. So the answer is we're working on all that stuff. So you've got a kind of definitive record of what it is, and you can export it as PDFs and all the rest.
And then the other question is the cognitive offloading issue more concerning in secondary or higher education? How do we know when it is happening? Should we assume is happening anytime the student uses a generic LLM that isn't constrained by meta prompts?
Yep. The answer is you can never know. So, you can never know. And I think the extent of people's use is probably more than anybody, and all the ethics stuff where please declare what you've done is kind of a joke, because we live in a competitive system, which is quite, there's a whole lot of reasons why expecting people to behave ethically is kind of unreasonable and not, it's not going to, some people might and some people do and some people don't. By the way, this is a massive crisis point for academic journals as well, and all academic publishing. So people might know I'm also involved with Common Ground Publishing, and we're going to introduce this as an editing space for academic research as well, where you can declare, the output will declare exactly what foundation models you've used, the way in which you've used them. And, what we want to do is our metrics going to be, and we're building the metrics out at the moment, is we're going to say as an instructor or as a journal publisher, 20% AI, 80% human, 50-50, 80-20. We're going to be able to say, these are our expectations. You can see how much you've done so far and how much you've used it so far. And the optimum is somewhere in the middle between the bottom threshold and the top threshold, or within those thresholds. And we're going to allow you to do it, but we'll have a definitive record of the extent to which you've used it. You must use it. Don't write a research article without using AI ever again, right? I do it all the time. I don't copy stuff, but it really helps my thinking and it really helps the work that I do. So, of course, people are going to use AI extensively. And look, you just got to set the thresholds of what you consider to be acceptable, which we can know, again, via this contextual AI.
Thank you, by the way, for a very, very amazing presentation. I worked in all levels of education, primary, secondary, now academia. Cheating is as old as education.
Of course.
My question for you is, how do we communicate with our students the advantages of deep learning versus superficial learning? Aside from the technological advances and things like that, how do we let them know that this is the way that they're going to learn, retain that knowledge? How do we communicate that? There has been a story that came out of a university, which I will not name. You might have heard of it. This was around the week of the finals, about 3-4 weeks ago. This professor made an assignment that was AI resistant. And the students got together and went up all the way, I think, to the provost, claiming that this professor was limiting them in their
Of course.
knowledge. So how do we go around these situations? First of all, how do we convince the students deep learning is the way to go? And secondly, can you speak about this other story?
Okay, so I don't know how you convince people of anything. I'm here now trying to convince you folks, in the sense that I'm trying to just say things, which is what I do as a researcher. So that's all I can do, really, and spread the word to some degree. I think this is a real inflection point in education. It's going to change things in a really profound way. It's a moment of disruption, which maybe we need, maybe we deserved all along, but it's there. Apropos of that professor, they shouldn't exist anymore. They won't exist anymore because, why would you say, look, you could say, I want you to do an assignment on the French Revolution, but you're not allowed to use the books or a library, it's just, this stuff is so powerful and can be so helpful in learning and is so ubiquitous now that that's a completely unrealistic thing to say, right? That's the first thing. The other side of the coin is there was the case of the student that sued the school because the teacher gave AI feedback. Did you hear that one? Well, again, of course, teachers are going to use AI for feedback all the time. This is what this does. But the teacher then has to have an argument. This is what I did. I built this knowledge base. I built these rubric agents. I set up the task. And that's what I do as a teacher. And I'm talking to you through the AI. That's why AI is such a terrible idea. I mean, we use this idea, cybersocial learning, which cyber is feedback. AI is replication, which is I'm going to cheat. Cyber is feedback relationships. So, it's feedback in a relationship between humans and AI. And any teacher that doesn't use it these days is out of business. And any student that doesn't use it now is not going to do very well, because these are powerful tools which can help you think. Problem is, powerful tools which can reduce your thinking as well, which gets back to the title of my paper or this presentation, which is how do we optimize that?
There was one article by Barb Oakley, who's done the big course on learning how to learn and writes about learning theory. And she made a case for that people, I mean, we've always made that case that you actually need to read, and the further case was memorization has a role in intelligence. How does this platform, I mean, does it eliminate the need for memorize? I guess all AI do, but does this bring?
Yeah, there's also an argument for the most important memorization is memorization incidental. You're going to learn, you're going to remember things from these environments, and this may well be a better way to remember things than learning by rote, right? So there's no argument that memory is important. So look, here's a contradictory answer. We rely on long-term memory less because we have these cognitive prostheses, if you like, which are, you're in the restaurant, you look up something on your phone. Oh, I saw a movie about this, or what was it about this person? And you look it up. So in a way, we've become reliant on these cognitive prostheses, which means that long-term memory is less relevant. On the other hand, if this is powerful learning, you're going to remember stuff from it, incidental to the learning. So you don't have to learn stuff by rote anymore for memory to be effective. You're going to learn things more powerfully. In fact, the argument is when you're an active maker of meaning, you remember things more effectively than when it's passive. So memory may well be really, really powerful in these environments, but in different ways.
Last one from me real quick. This was wonderful, and at the PhD level and graduate level, and then K through 12, and many of your people are working toward K through 12. So I'm just guessing what this would look like for a third grader in this environment.
Right.
And then with the question, I mean, are there fundamental differences between writing a PhD and writing a third grade?
Right. Our rough bottom threshold is grade 4. That's our rough bottom threshold. And that's the point at which a child is able to make what we call complex knowledge representation. So an example might be, choose your favorite animal and write a scientific report on the animal, like what's the environment they live in, what's their life cycle. There are a number of key kind of conceptual aspects that you would need to cover. I like elephants and you like dolphins, but if I'm going to write on each of those, there are things I need to cover to give you an adequate account of the life of an elephant and the life of a dolphin. So in other words, that's the point at which complex knowledge representation comes in. So our complex epistemic performance, if you like, it's the beginnings of that, and it lines with Piaget and Vygotsky and whatever. So for this, our bottom threshold is about grade 4. It's also when you start writing more than a paragraph or a paragraph or more. It's when you start, you can put videos in here as well. Here's my dog, and but you got to write a caption, or you got to do a voiceover or something. So that's kind of our bottom threshold, and then beyond that, the sky's the limit. Right? Yeah.
Very good. Yes, thank you. I think we're at time, right? I see some of our online audience starting to check out. Any last minute questions before we end the recording here?
Question on integration with other LMS. Any plans?
Yes. So 2 answers to that. One is I've actually overcome my anxiety that my bank account is a different login to my Amazon account. So at one level, the question is kind of, it's annoying. It's an annoying institutional question when people want to control your logins in a university. If the university insists on controlling your logins, and interestingly, it doesn't control your logins into Google search, There are a lot of logins it doesn't control, but if it wants to control this login, you can connect it via LTI API. We've done that in the old version. We haven't done it in this version yet. So you can put this inside of Canvas or whatever dreadful LMS system you use. But in a way, that's low priority for us. But we have done it before, and it's not hugely difficult to do.